everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So we're continuing our unit here on modern issues in the world today. Today we're going to start talking about some natural disasters and the havoc they can wreak on the modern world. Alright, let's get started. So natural disasters like volcanoes or tsunamis or earthquakes or tornadoes. These are all things that are, as the name implies, they're natural and they've happened all the time. However, natural disasters present day cause catastrophically more damage than they did throughout the history of humanity. A large part of that is, as we've been talking about, is the population of the world has skyrocketed. So natural disasters, when they happen, affect a larger group of people than they previously have throughout history. And we're going to talk about today how having a globalized society is actually a pretty good thing when it comes to natural disasters. But we're also going to talk about how some of the other issues that we've been talking about that still face the earth today, like poverty, really magnify the negative impact of natural disasters. So, natural disasters, there's a couple that I want to specifically talk about today. One of the ones that I want to talk about is the tsunami that hit in Indonesia in 2004. So, a tsunami is like a huge wave that'll hit a landmass. This typically happens when an earthquake takes place under the ocean, and it gets the water shaking, and it can make massive damage to landfall when these like huge walls of water make landfall. And that happened in Indonesia in 2004, and hundreds of thousands of people died. Now, this is the picture that you're probably expecting to see of the tsunami. Like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yes, it's so crazy. This is actually from a movie. I think the movie was called 2012, and it's like the end times. And this is a CGI made movie. However, the reason I put this in here, even though this is not the actual picture of the tsunami that hit Indonesia, this is the actual picture that hit Indonesia. All right, you're like, oh, well, that's not that bad. All right. That's why I specifically wanted to put this picture here, because even though this is what it looks like, if you look at it at a still frame, understand that the water height with these ocean has increased 6 or 7 feet and has come across as an actual wall of water. So it's not like it hits and then washes back out to shore. It's got like infinite amounts of water that's still 6 or 7 feet high, continuously coming in, and completely will wipe out entire towns, villages, cities. The level of devastating impact is like this. This is what it feels like to get hit with a tsunami like that. Absolutely cataclysmic level of damage done with the tsunami that hit Indonesia in 2004. This is an after picture. This was a full-on time. You still kind of see where the streets and stuff were. This mosque here actually got drug. This is not its original location. This is an entire city. It just gets wiped clean. The chances of surviving this are very slim. Where are you going to go? It's like you're stuck at the bottom of a wave for days sometimes. Absolutely catastrophic. Now, natural disasters happen, like this one in Indonesia, which shocked the world. I think it's the 6th most deadly disaster at the time it was. The world saw this, though, and the death toll would have been much higher, because after the water recedes, your entire infrastructure is gone. As far as you can see, there's no water, there's no food, there's no nothing. You need medical supplies. If this was 200 years ago and this happened, most of the people that had survived the initial impact of the tsunami would have died because they couldn't get food, water, supplies, or anything. When the world saw this happen, once the water receded, even though tons of people passed away from the actual natural event itself, being able to get food, water, and medical supplies in there with the UN as soon as they were able to really did save a lot of lives. So natural disasters in the modern world cause so much more damage because there's such a larger population near water's edges and things like a tsunami that, put more people in harm's way. But simultaneously, the world can react together and provide much needed supplies afterwards to help recover. So the question here is, how can globalization help countries that are hit by massive natural disasters? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. Now, I had told you that poverty makes natural disasters worse. And you're like, how is that? And you might be thinking along the lines of, okay, well, I can think this through. Maybe the dangerous places to live, like right next to a volcano, maybe that's cheaper land, so poor people have to live next to the volcano. So if the volcano explodes, it would kill those people, and therefore being poor makes it more dangerous to natural disasters. You probably wouldn't be wrong in that analogy there. However, I want to talk about Haiti in particular. There's an earthquake in Haiti in 2010. All right. It is a 7 on the Richter scale. It was a 7, which is a solid, powerful earthquake. Haiti is a very poor country. All right. This is just a drone picture of flying over just the buildings that have collapsed. Very poor country. Nobody really knows how many people died in Haiti. There's guesstimates that it was 1 million. They originally came out, it was like, there's like 2,000. The guesstimates are all over the place on how many people died there. As we get further away from it, the guesstimate gets narrowed down between 100,000 people and 160,000 people died in Haiti at this earthquake in 2010. So give or take 60,000 humans. So even in the modern world, keeping track of such a catastrophe and how many people were impacted is crazy that you can't get an accurate number of how many people died because it was so cataclysmic. Now, if you're standing in the middle of an open field and an earthquake hits, you're fine. You just shake a little bit and you're fine. The problem with earthquakes is when you're in buildings. And because of larger populations, people live in urban areas. So when earthquakes hit modern day, especially near cities, it's absolutely catastrophic because the buildings collapsing on top of people inside the buildings is where these deaths come from. So you're like, okay, but this earthquake could have happened anywhere, and you're right, technically, depending on where the tectonic plates are. But why is poverty connected with the massive loss of life in Haiti? This picture right here, or these two pictures, I think tells the story of poverty and natural disasters. On the left, this is Haiti. Magnitude 7 earthquake in 2010 kills 100,000 to 160,000 people. We just talked about it. Just wiped out entire cities. 2 months later, in Chile, which is not known to be a rich country, they had an 8.8 magnitude earthquake. So I had to look to make sure this wasn't a random fact. 8.8 is more than a 7. However, the issue is that an 8.8 earthquake isn't just like 1.8 times stronger. I mean, even that math wouldn't add up. More than a 7. It's like 700 times stronger. It's astronomically more brutal the further up on the Richter scale you go, and 10 is the top. 500 people died from this earthquake in Chile and hit the same amount of people over the 100 to 160,000 people that died in Haiti. And the reason is, Haiti is a very poor country. Their buildings are not made up to the same code richer countries are. It is just concrete slabs put together. When an earthquake hit a poor country, their buildings that were put together because they didn't have the resources to make earthquake resistant buildings completely collapsed on the people. Whereas Chile, who was able to put more capital into their buildings and make them earthquake resistant did not suffer the same fate and lost a lot less people. So in this instance, had Haiti been a more prosperous country and had a different standards for building their buildings, this death rate would have been minuscule compared to what it was. So poverty on top of a huge population and a natural disaster is a terrible combination that we have learned from these events. So answer this question here completely. Pause me if you need to. And we'll move on. All right, so let's talk about some localized environmental problems. So the Earth has been here for a long time. Humans have thrived with the Earth. With the population increase, humans consistently want the same resources they've always had. However, now, since the human population is skyrocketing, for everybody to have the same amount of resources they've always had and the same amount of stuff they've always had is brutal on the Earth. There's a lot of things that are really causing humans to reflect on our own practices and realize, hey, some of the stuff we're doing can't be good. So let's start here with acid rain. All right. So acid rain is the most directly point to humans, like, humans, why are you doing this? Deforestation, which we'll talk about here in a second also. But acid rain is brutal on the environment, and I'll explain to you here in a minute why you should care about that. So as humans create these factories to mass produce whatever it is, we release things from these factories into the air, these chemicals into the air. It then mixes in with the clouds, and when it rains, the rain has chemicals in it that's called acid rain. Now, if you're out and it's like acid rain comes out and you get hit with acid rain, you're not gonna be like, I'm acid and I'm melting. That's not what acid rain is. But vegetation needs water. Just neutral, straight up water. When you add a bunch of stuff into the water that is basically like poison for plants, which is what acid rain is, it is devastating not only to trees, right, and vegetation, but if it gets into the drinking water and those chemicals that are coming out of the factory that it rains down and it gets into your drinking water, it can cause all types of diseases and negativity, right, in your body. So acid rain is something that a lot of industrializing nations deal with because they're trying to catch up with the rest of the richer countries thanks to globalization, but they're not doing so safely by limiting the amount of chemicals that are in their factories. So acid rain will just start annihilating the surrounding vegetation. And it's not just acid rain. Humans will do it on their own with this concept of deforestation. So you need forest, all right? We need natural area. Let me go through the story and get to the end, and then I'll explain that more, kind of looking backwards at it. So not only is acid rain wiping out vegetation, humans are just clear-cutting trees, right? So if it's not already dead from acid rain, humans are cutting down trees as fast as they possibly can for all types of materials that are used with wood. So this has never been a problem until modern society, because people have always used wood for their stuff. The thing is there's not a ton of humans then. So you could cut it down and it would grow back, and then you would cut down the next one, all right? The problem is with the massive spike in human population, they're cutting down trees and don't have time to wait for more trees to grow back. So like in this picture, instead of waiting for this tree to grow back and cut it down again, they just go off into the distance and cut down all these trees in the background here, and it ends up looking like this. All right? This is called deforestation. So here's why that is bad. Deforestation is not really reversible because it will eventually turn into desertification, which means all that place that used to be forest turns into desert. Now, you're like, what do you mean it turns into desert? What if it's in a tropical place? A desert just means nothing can live there. This is what happens when you cut down all the trees in a forest like this. Because those trees have been there for a really, really long time. When you cut down those trees, everything that lives there can no longer live there. The animals can't live there. The small plants that need all the shade can't live there. And everything disappears because those big trees are gone down. Nothing can exist there again until those big trees come back, which can take 100 years to come back. And nobody's going to wait 100 years. Not only that, once it becomes barren, like desertification, the animals running through the woods and taking a poop next to a tree, giving it the fertilizer to grow up, none of that exists. You can't just go back to a place that's been clear cut like this and it eventually will look like this and just plant trees here and expect them to grow. There's no nutrients here because everything that was below the trees, all those animals, that kept the tree alive. You completely wiped out entire ecosystems. All right. When you're wiping out entire ecosystems, you're messing up the environment, your air quality. You're messing up your the foods that are available there, the animal species that are available there, and as much as the stories I want to go into of how critical change one small species change in a rainforest can cause. Oh, I would love to. Don't have time. Kind of out of scope of this course, but when you start messing with species in an area, it's a cataclysmic effect. So not only have humans gone through and wiped out tons of rainforest area, there's no real way of getting it back. And this is a human-made problem with the necessity and the desire for globalization and for countries to sell things people will buy. And a lot of times it's their natural resources. And if you're like Brazil, it was your rainforest. The problem is rainforests are needed for a lot of other things other than human consumption. And once you clear cut them, there's really no coming back from it. So the question here is, how can globalization lead to issues that involve humans negatively impacting our natural environment? So talk about some acid rain here, talk about some deforestation, some desertification, but answer this completely. Pause me if you need to, and we're going to move on. All right. Let's talk about the worldwide environmental problem. It's pretty obvious that acid rain, for deforestation, desertification, those are human-caused events. That's clear. I mean, we clearly did it. Well, there's this thing called global warming, and it ain't good in a lot of aspects. So there is still a debate. This is 2022. Still a debate, I guess, over is this caused by humans or not? The Earth is getting warmer, and we're going to talk about that. You can have a debate. Are humans causing it with the use of CO2? All right. There's a lot of people that say it is, and there's some people who say it's not. But regardless, humans still have to deal with this because the Earth is getting warmer. And so the Earth does fluctuate over time with temperatures, but the increase in temperatures, regardless of the cause of it, is having really negative effects on our planet as a whole. To explain this, over the last 50 years, this is on Earth the places and the average increase in temperature. The whole planet overall is getting warmer. Now, you're like, why is that bad? And then you always hear people like, oh, the polar bears, they're gonna sink. Like, you know, the Arctic ice caps are gonna melt, and then the polar bears. That's an overly simplified, because let's be honest, the polar bears probably aren't going to impact your individual life a whole bunch. But global warming affects everything in our life, especially when it comes to natural disasters. By changing climate, you have places that were getting rain that won't get any rain, and then when fires start, you're going to see wildfires all the time. Turn on the news, there's always a wildfire somewhere, and it's a lot of times it's because places that aren't used to being that dry got dry, and then because of human population, somebody, left the campfire on, dropped a cigarette, lightning strike, anything can happen to start a wildfire, and then it just spreads wildly. That's why it's called wildfire. Desertification or just drought. All right. When temperature changes, the things that you used to be able to grow may not be able to be grown anymore because you're not getting the same rainfall. The one that affects us here in America probably the most is the hurricanes. Because of the increasing water temperature in the Atlantic, the expectation is that the hurricanes will consistently get stronger and stronger and stronger with the increasing temperature of the Atlantic Ocean, which is something that hurricanes thrive on. So, regardless of people debating on whether or not humans are causing global warming or not, the fact is that the Earth is getting warmer, and it is something that is going to affect everybody. And there is a multitude of ways that humans can combat this, or ideas, but getting everybody on the same page for anything, even in a globalized society, tends to be more difficult than you would expect. The question here is explain what some of the consequences could be of a steadily warming planet. All right. That's as much as I got for you guys tomorrow. That's as much as I got for you guys today. See you guys tomorrow.